Chapter 3 XuXul's Harvest of Innocence. Whispers of Torment. Throughout the annals of human history, the canvas of time is stained with the blood of countless innocents, marred by the wanton, unnecessary brutality of man against man. In ancient Rome, the gladiatorial games stand as a testament to the callous disregard for human life. Thousands were forced to fight to the death for the entertainment of the masses. The cheers of the crowd echoed through the Colosseum as lives were extinguished, all in the name of spectacle. Centuries later, during the Crusades, religious fervor became a justification for unimaginable horrors. The sacking of Jerusalem in 1099 saw the streets run red with the blood of both soldiers and civilians. The clash of civilizations led to unspeakable acts of violence, with brutality masked as divine duty. The transatlantic slave trade, spanning from the 16th to the 19th centuries, stands as a dark chapter in human history. Millions of Africans were forcibly torn from their homes, enduring the horrors of the Middle Passage, overcrowded, disease-ridden slave ships where countless perished. The dehumanization of individuals based on race laid the groundwork for centuries of systemic oppression. The 20th century witnessed the horrors of the Holocaust, where the Nazi regime systematically exterminated 6 million Jews. Concentration camps like Auschwitz and Treblinka became symbols of the depths to which humanity could sink, with innocent lives destroyed in gas chambers, starvation, and disease. The rape of Nanking, during the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937, marked another nadir in human cruelty. The invading Japanese forces subjected the Chinese population to unspeakable atrocities, including mass rape and the indiscriminate killing of civilians. The city became a hell on earth as the streets ran with the blood of the innocent. The horrors of Pol Pot's killing fields, occurring during the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia from 1975 to 1979, were marked by systematic brutality and mass atrocities. Under the leadership of Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge aimed to create an agrarian communist society, resulting in a devastating and ruthless campaign. Countless innocent Cambodians, perceived as enemies of the state, intellectuals, professionals were targeted for extermination. Victims endured forced labor, torture, and execution in the killing fields, where mass graves held the remains of an estimated 1.7 to 2.5 million people. The regime's policies led to widespread famine, disease, and the obliteration of families. The Rwandan genocide in 1994 exposed the world to the horrors of ethnic violence. Hutus targeted Tutsis in a brutal campaign of mass killings, leaving an estimated 800,000 people dead. These numerous events, though disparate in time and space, share a common thread of human cruelty. Yet, amidst the horror, a living malice lurks, unseen but intimately coupled to the dark recesses of human spite. Skillfully whispering its dark magic into an ethereal stream of havoc and chaos. Spectral manipulations. As XuXul delved deeper into the spectral void, it discovered a profound connection to the minds of the living. It found that the electrical currents generated by the human brain waves, resonated within the spectral domain, allowing XuXul to interact with the mental processes of individuals. Initially, XuXul's influence was subtle, a whisper amidst the cacophony of thoughts and emotions that surged through the minds of the living. It could detect fleeting emotions, catch glimpses of fleeting thoughts, and even influence the most basic of decisions. As XuXul's power grew, its ability to manipulate the minds of the living expanded. It could implant simple suggestions, distort perceptions, and even induce hallucinations. However, XuXul discovered that its influence was not perfect. The mighty wraith of malice and corrupter of extraordinaire prowess was astonishingly powerless to seed heinous thoughts directly within a human mind. It had to wait for thoughts of horror to take shape naturally in minds of hatred. These incomplete minds, already susceptible to self-delusion, were easily swayed by XuXul's insidious whispers, like malleable clay in the entity's spectral hands. Manipulating the intersections between the spectral plane and reality, it deftly enhanced, nurtured, and developed these impure thoughts into overwhelming emotions. XuXul reveled in its ability to bend these individuals to its will, exploiting their insecurities and fears, twisting their thoughts into a web of deception. It was a delicious plaything for XuXul's malevolent appetite, a constant reminder of the power it wielded over the minds of the living. However, XuXul's influence was met with resistance in those individuals possessing strong convictions and unwavering moral principles. These individuals, their minds anchored in a foundation of integrity and courage, deflected XuXul's attempts at manipulation, their willpower proving an impenetrable shield against the entity's insidious influence. XuXul, frustrated by its inability to sway these individuals, found itself drawn to their resilience, their unwavering commitment to their values. It was a paradox, a challenge that ignited a spark of jealousy within the malevolent entity. XuXul began to observe these individuals, studying their minds, their thoughts, their actions, seeking to understand the source of their strength and divining their weaknesses. It observed how they navigated the complexities of life, the challenges they faced, and the strength they drew from their convictions. In these individuals of unwavering conviction, XuXul found a glimpse of a different kind of power, a power that transcended the limitations of the physical world. It was a power rooted in conviction, in the unwavering belief in one's principles, in the courage to stand against injustice and oppression. The more XuXul observed, the more it began to recognize the limitations of its own existence. It was bound by the spectral realm, unable to fully comprehend the complexities of the physical world, the motivations and emotions that drove human behavior. XuXul, supreme intellect and ancient relic, finally understood the abiding and unwritten laws of sentience, laws that it have inadvertently, unknowingly, and continuously broken since its birth, eons ago. Laws that it could not escape being eternally trapped by. To neutralize its ever-burgeoning regret and disquiet, the Wraith profoundly resolved to disrupt, discourage, tempt, foul, malign, harm and degrade any aspect of human condition within its reach. XuXul had discovered a frighteningly simple formula for a successful harvest, unique and specific to disrupting and harming humans. The first step involved seeking out a happy and contented tribe, living lives of bliss and joy. Then, uncovering the slightest, most inconspicuous of potential lines of difference that separated its members, XuXul spun its web to divide the once happy tribe into two rival factions. These differences could be as innocuous and innocent as a crest on a hill separating two valleys, a stream separating opposing banks, the timbre of a dialect, a specialization of a diet, a tilt in a belief system, a tint of skin color, a mispronounced name, a span in height and build, the angle of a nose, the roundness of eyes and yes, the size of ear lobes. Secondly, search out in one particular faction, an agent of change, an individual of a particularly damaged, nasty, narcissistic, power-hungry, greedy, avaricious and ambitious disposition. In truth, XuXul, not being human nor alive, could not identify any of these points of difference itself. It relied on its chosen one's discerning hatred to find its focus. It then simply had to whisper, its dark magical spells that nurtured and encouraged the chosen one's deepest emotions, to flare and manipulate its factional members to a frenzy of unbridled aggression. Rupturing the line of difference and transforming it into a festering fetid fracture. Violence, rape, enslavement and the death of innocence was certain to follow. XuXul had been astonished at the ease at which it could renew this evil cycle of reap and harvest, and equally astonished that these otherwise clever creatures had not been able to recognize and break this predictable and monotonous pattern. No mercy had been shown to XuXul in life and XuXul would show no mercy in return now. There could be no return, no redemption, no escape. Or at least that is what it believed. And in its quest for darkness, a few spectacularly barbaric phenomenon marked particularly fruitful harvests of souls. An Englishman abroad. Vienna, Austro-Hungarian Empire, 1899. The city pulsed with life, a vibrant tapestry of art, culture, and intellectual fervor. Amidst this vibrant backdrop, Houston Stewart Chamberlain, a British-born Germanophile, a polymath and self-proclaimed philosopher, toiled away in his study for over 5 years, crafting his widely acclaimed magnum opus, The Foundations of the 19th Century. Chamberlain's study was a sanctuary of knowledge and introspection, lined with bookshelves overflowing with volumes on philosophy, history, literature, and music. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and leather, mingling with the faint aroma of pipe tobacco that lingered from Chamberlain's frequent indulgences. On this particular afternoon, Chamberlain was engrossed in revising a particularly controversial section of his manuscript, one that delved into the concept of Aryanism. The idea that the Aryan race, a supposed master race descended from ancient Proto-Indo-Europeans as the progenitor of Western civilization, had gained traction in certain intellectual circles, including those of Vienna's elite. Chamberlain, a fervent advocate of Aryanism, believed that the Nordic peoples, the embodiment of the Aryan ideal, were destined to lead humanity towards a new era of enlightenment and cultural supremacy. His ideas were radical and often controversial, but they resonated with a growing number of individuals who felt a sense of alienation and dispossession in the face of rapid social and political change. But as Chamberlain's mind was consumed by his work, a malevolent presence lurked in the shadows of his study, the ever-watchful XuXul. The spectral being drawn to the darkness of human nature, had been observing Chamberlain's work with growing fascination. XuXul recognized the potential for immense destruction in Chamberlain's ideas of Aryanism. The concept of a superior race would immediately consign all others into second-class servitude. XuXul saw how these ideas would easily translate to justify hatred, division, and ultimately, violence. Driven by its innate twisted desire to sow chaos and destruction, XuXul began to subtly influence Chamberlain's thoughts. It whispered insidious suggestions into his subconscious, subtly twisting his ideas into more radical and provocative forms. As Chamberlain's work progressed, XuXul's influence grew stronger. The book, originally intended as a philosophical treatise, transformed into a manifesto for racial supremacy. After much debate and encouragement from the elite Wagnerian appreciation clique that Chamberlain championed in Vienna, this book was finally in print. They met frequently for sophisticated soirees at one of the nobles' castles or other fine villas in Vienna. His two friends, Baron Christian von Ehrenfels and Herr Ludwig Schyman, entered the plush drawing room of Prince Hohenzollern-Langenburg's Vienna villa, their faces alight with enthusiasm. "We have just heard the news, Houston," exclaimed Ehrenfels, his voice brimming with excitement. "The first printing of your book has been completed." Chamberlain's eyes lit up. "Wonderful," he exclaimed, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. "I can't wait to hear the world's reaction to my work." "I have no doubt that it will be met with great acclaim," declared Schyman, his voice filled with unwavering confidence. "Your ideas are groundbreaking and revolutionary, Houston. They are destined to change the course of history." Chamberlain nodded, his pride evident in his expression. "I believe so, Ludwig," he said solemnly. "Our Aryan race is destined for greatness, and I am determined to spread the word. Just as we have planned." The three friends continued their discussion, their voices intertwining in a passionate exchange of ideas. They spoke of the future of the Aryan race, of its potential to shape the world in its image, and of the challenges that lay ahead. As the evening wore on, Chamberlain's study descended into a whirlwind of intellectual discourse laced with rabid anti-Semitism and racist dictum. Books were consulted, theories debated, and arguments passionately articulated. The air crackled with the energy of their collective twisted abstract intellectual prowess. When the friends finally parted ways, Chamberlain was left with a renewed sense of purpose. He had found kindred spirits in Ehrenfels and Schyman, allies in his quest to elevate the Aryan race to its rightful place in the world. His job was nearly done. As he returned to his work, Chamberlain's mind was ablaze with ideas. He envisioned a future where the Aryan race, guided by his wisdom and vision, would usher in a new era of enlightenment and prosperity for the correct sort of people. But amidst his lofty aspirations, Chamberlain was also aware of the challenges that lay ahead. The world was a complex and often dangerous place, and the path to Aryan supremacy would be fraught with obstacles. Still, Chamberlain remained undeterred. He was a man of strong conviction, his faith in the Aryan race unwavering. He was determined to overcome any obstacle, to fulfill his destiny as the prophet of the Aryan Renaissance. The world would soon hear his message, and the fate of the Aryan race would hang in the balance. Upon its release in 1899, the foundations of the 19th century quickly gained a wide readership, particularly among those who were already sympathetic to the concept of Aryanism. Chamberlain's ideas resonated with a growing sense of nationalism and anti-Semitism, which were prevalent in Europe at the time. XuXul watched with quiet satisfaction as Chamberlain's ideas took hold, gaining traction in the intellectual circles of Europe. XuXul's influence extended beyond Chamberlain, seeping into the political discourse of the time. It found fertile ground in the minds of those who sought to exploit the fears and insecurities of an increasingly fragmented society. It silently reveled in the growing sense of division and animosity that Chamberlain's work was fostering. A monstrous touch paper had been lit. As the 20th century recovered from the meaningless horror of World War I, XuXul's influence reached a destructive nexus of unparalleled magnitude, an agent of change par excellence. Adolf Hitler, a charismatic leader with a penchant for grand illusions and simple solutions to complex problems, embraced Chamberlain's ideas as his own. Hitler, who came to power in Germany in 1933, was a fervent admirer of Chamberlain's work. He saw Chamberlain's ideas as providing a theoretical justification for his own political ambitions, and he incorporated most of Chamberlain's twisted concepts into the Nazi ideology. Chamberlain's influence on the Nazi movement was profound. XuXul watched as Hitler rose to power in Germany, using Chamberlain's writings as a foundation for his own brand of racial nationalism. The seeds of destruction sown by XuXul in the mind of Chamberlain had borne fruit, unleashing a tsunami of violence and hatred that would forever scar human history. XuXul saw how Hitler's twisted ideology drove the persecution of Jews, Slavs, Roma, and other minorities, leading to the atrocities of World War II. XuXul, the silent manipulator, had achieved its malevolent goal, leaving behind a legacy of pain and suffering that would endure for generations. It was during this time of great fracture and chaos that something entirely new occurred. Legion, for I am many. As XuXul's insatiable appetite for suffering grew, so did the cracks in its malevolent personality. The entity, once a singular, unified force feeding upon the torment of the innocent, began to exhibit signs of internal turmoil. The relentless consumption of pain and despair seemed to take a toll on XuXul's cohesion, as if the weight of its own malevolence was causing fractures in its core. At first, these cracks manifested as subtle shifts in demeanor, a fleeting hesitation here, an unexpected surge of empathy there. XuXul, a once monolithic embodiment of malevolence, found itself grappling with conflicting impulses. The entity's insidious hunger clashed with an emerging discord within, creating a tumultuous inner landscape. As the cracks deepened, a profound transformation unfolded. XuXul began to splinter into multiple personas, each a distorted reflection of the original entity. These interconnected but separate facets retained the essence of XuXul's darkness, yet each harbored distinct nuances. It was as if the entity's voracious appetite had birthed a fractured collective, a choir of sinister voices resonating in a dissonant harmony. These newly formed personas shared a symbiotic link, their existence intertwined in a malevolent dance. While connected by a common origin, they developed unique traits and desires. The once unified XuXul became a fragmented entity, a collective of darkness bound by a shared origin but divergent in expression. The fractured personas, now existing in a delicate balance, continued their insidious quest for suffering. Yet, in their fragmented state, the multiple XuXuls navigated the realm of malevolence with a complexity that hinted at a deeper, internal struggle. The entity, once singular in purpose, now embraced a multifaceted existence, its fractured personalities echoing the cracks that had emerged within the fabric of its insidious being. This fragmentation, however, did not diminish XuXul's malevolent power. On the contrary, the splintered entities, each with its own unique and often contradictory perspectives, created a synergistic lift, amplifying the entity's encompassing malevolence. The fractured XuXuls, like a tangled web of venomous threads, became an even more potent force of destruction. The cracks in XuXul's personality, rather than weakening the entity, paradoxically strengthened it. The fractured personas, each with its own insatiable hunger, created a vortex of suffering, a relentless machine of torment that devoured the very essence of hope and compassion. There were a throng of horrors that contributed to the birth of this legion of cataclysm, but three stand out above all others. Specters of the Stairs. As the autumn sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the serene Austrian landscape, an elderly man, stooped with the weight of the years, stood before the locked entrance of Gusen II, a subterranean subcamp and part of the gigantic archipelago of concentration camps collectivized as Mauthausen. His name was Jacob Müller, and though the world knew him as a survivor, the ghosts of his past haunted the recesses of his memory. Now, on this somber evening, he found himself standing at the threshold of a cavernous abyss that had once been the epicenter of unimaginable suffering. The man's gnarled fingers traced the outline of the rock-carved gates, where the words, Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free, had once been etched, a cruel irony to those who had experienced the horrors within. Jacob's breath hitched as he grappled with the haunting memories that clamored for attention from the depths of his subconscious. Mauthausen was a collection of over 101 separate camps and subcamps. The first, a notorious labor camp had been carved into the granite cliffs, was where Jacob's illegal incarceration began in 1941. Every hard-won right, every flicker of human dignity from centuries of struggles, was flayed raw by the whips and curses of the capos, the cold bite of steel against bone. Days of back-breaking toil stretching like wounds into the dusk, 11 hours in summer's searing sun, 9 in winter's bone-chilling grip, clawing blocks of stone from the camp's cliff face, then shattering them into smaller pieces, hands bleeding, back screaming. Then hoisting these burdens onto exhausted shoulders, each one a silent accusation, and then climbing. Climbing the 186 steps of the Todestage, the stairway of death. Even without the crushing weight of stone, walking those steps is a soul-stealing affair. Each one, hard and unforgiving, mocks the belief of hope. But for thousands, this was an unending torment, the ascent a slow, grinding execution. Inmates, guilty of no crime, forced to run up those steps, their rocks tumbling back down, crushing the feet of those behind, a macabre game of human dominoes. Exhaustion met only the lash, every dropped stone a fresh torment. And at the bottom, what awaited? A pond, nestled beneath a sheer rock face, its surface bristling with sharp, submerged teeth. Here, the SS played their fiendish game, chuckling as they sent men hurtling off the cliff, their screams swallowed by the rock and water, their bodies christened Fallschirmspringer, parachutists, in a warped jest. These men, far from home, died deaths of unimaginable agony. And even in other camps, its name, Mauthausen, whispered chills down spines. For those who returned, it was a byword for Dante's Inferno, a place where hope went to die. Mauthausen wasn't just a camp, it was a monument to human barbarity, a testament to the depths of depravity that can be reached. As Jacob hesitated before the entrance, he recalled the vivid scenes etched into the canvas of his mind, the pitiless gaze of the SS guards, the brutal punishments inflicted on those deemed disobedient, the relentless toil that drained the life force from prisoners. He had witnessed the torment of friends, the lashings, the arbitrary executions, and the perpetual shadow of starvation. Miraculously, Jacob had survived the horrors of the granite quarry, and in late 1944 was transferred to the nearby Gusen II, a concentration camp hidden beneath the village of St. Georgen, dug out by hand by its inmates. They dug 500,000 square feet of cavern space, so that the Messerschmitt Company could build an assembly plant to produce the Messerschmitt 262 jet fighter and the infamous V 2 rockets. A huge proportion of the inmates who entered these caverns never got out alive. It was the closest place to a living hell on Earth. The memory of his friend Carl, a kindred soul in that dark abyss, haunted Jacob still. Carl had faltered on the stairs of death, unable to continue. The guards, indifferent to his suffering, had cast him aside like a broken tool. Jacob, powerless to intervene, could only watch as Carl's body was dragged away, a shell of the vibrant man he had once been. As Jacob stood frozen in the haunting silence, the ethereal presence of XuXul cast a subtle shadow over the cavern, a spectral witness to the atrocities etched into the very core of Mauthausen. In the entrance of the dimly lit cavern, Jacob's whispered words reached the echoes of the past. "Carl, my friend, I see you still. Do you hear me in this boundless silence?" The air seemed to ripple with the weight of unspoken pain. A faint whisper, barely audible, brushed against Jacob's senses. "Jacob, my brother, I am free of this terrible place. Please remember us as we were in Amsterdam. Do not let the darkness consume you entirely." Tears welled in Jacob's eyes as he sought solace in the spectral connection. "Why, Carl? Why were we subjected to such cruelty? What purpose did it serve?" Carl's voice, a distant murmur from the realms of memory, replied, "The cruelty was not our fate, it was the stain of others upon our souls. But in the face of darkness, we found a flicker of humanity. Hold on to that, Jacob. It is our defiance against the shadows." As XuXul silently absorbed the unspoken exchange, the interplay between the living and the lingering echoes of the tormented past unfolded like a tragic symphony, resonating within the confines of Mauthausen's unforgiving embrace. Starvation, as insidious as any oppressor, claimed countless lives within the bowels of the caverns. Meager rations, coupled with backbreaking labor, left the prisoners emaciated and on the brink of death. Jacob vividly recalled the hollow eyes, the skeletal figures that shuffled through the tunnels in a grotesque dance with mortality. He himself had withstood the gnawing hunger, the taste of despair lingering on his tongue. Despite the horrors, moments of resilience and humanity flickered like fragile flames. In clandestine whispers, the inmates forged bonds that transcended the harsh reality of their existence. Jacob remembered sharing morsels of bread with a stranger who would later become a brother in suffering. Such acts of compassion, though scarce, were beacons of light in the abyss. The passage of time did not erase these memories, rather, it etched them more deeply into Jacob's soul. Now, as he stood before the cavern entrance, his heart pounded with trepidation. The fear that had once been his constant companion now loomed larger than the entrance to the tunnels. Would he have the strength to confront the shadows of his past, or would the ghosts that had haunted his dreams become corporeal once more? In the profound silence, Jacob's trembling hand reached for the cold metal of the gate. He closed his eyes, summoning the strength to step forward, to face the memories that lingered within the labyrinth of stone. Yet, the weight of the past pressed upon him, and he faltered. The suffocating darkness seemed to seep into his very being, whispering of suffering and loss. A tear traced a path down Jacob's weathered cheek, carrying with it the burden of decades. He stepped back from the entrance, unable to cross the threshold into the depths of the caverns once more. The elderly survivor, whose spirit had endured the harshest trials, now stood outside the gates, wrestling with the indomitable specters of his past. The haunting echoes of Mauthausen remained locked within the rock, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the weight of the unforgiving history that bore witness to one man's journey through the abyss. These caverns had been a rich source of spectral sustenance for XuXul. Although it fed just once upon the tortured death of the innocents, it feasted for time eternal on its caged souls. The SS guards and commanders who had lived out their lives unpunished, once architects of pain, were now reduced to mere remnants of their former selves in death. Stripped of their swagger and swallowed by the same suffering they had inflicted, they clung to fragments of their faded humanity as they faced the abyss. XuXul reveled in their despair, as the once deafening echoes of tyranny were replaced by anguished whispers. Each captive soul, privately ensnared in its solitary spectral prison, added to the cacophony of torment that fueled XuXul's insatiable appetite. The spectral entity, now adorned with the essence of its captive's suffering, floated above the cavernous expanse, a malevolent force reveling in the twisted banquet it had once orchestrated. The very air in the ethereal void resonated with the residual pain of those who had caused unimaginable torment in life. As XuXul danced among the cages, the captive souls, now devoid of the power they once wielded, screamed silent screams and writhed in perpetual agony. Logs of Unit 731. In the dark annals of history, Unit 731, a clandestine biological weapons research unit, operated under the auspices of the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II, perpetrating horrifying experiments on human subjects. Amidst this macabre chapter, XuXul lurked, feeding on the pain and suffering inflicted upon the innocent victims held captive within the unit's facilities. The unit subjected tens of thousands of captives, mostly poor Chinese civilians, to unimaginable horrors, infecting them with deadly pathogens like plague and typhus. As doctors meticulously bred the most lethal strains, XuXul hovered, whispering monstrous encouragement to these highly regarded but unimaginably twisted Japanese medical scientists, its spectral form pulsating with an insatiable hunger. The callous treatment by the Japanese military of these innocent Chinese civilians, their rights as human beings, was abrogated by simply referring to them as logs. One rare surviving harrowing testimony from a Unit 731 soldier spoke of the fate of pregnant Chinese women. The twisted aims of these experiments were to study the effects of infections and poison gas on unborn fetuses. These unfortunate innocent women were raped into unwanted pregnancies and then abdominally injected with pathogens and poisons that festered painfully for weeks, within mother and baby. Eventually, these fetuses were removed for further study by live cesarean sections which were routinely carried out without anesthesia. The innocent victims, screaming in agony on crude operating tables, implored these grotesque surgeons to terminate their lives immediately, for their pain must have been unbelievably excruciating. These military medical men deliberately refused this last wish for fear that it would endanger the infected fetus, the target of these gruesome experiments. No mother or baby is recorded to have survived any of these experiments. Another particularly chilling recollection from a Unit 731 survivor described the grotesque details of their methods. Victims, some already weakened by sickness, were laid out on cold, metal slabs, their bodies becoming a stage for the doctor's depraved experiments. XuXul, a silent observer, watched in morbid fascination as the lifeblood was drained from their veins, their cries of agony echoing through the sterile chambers. A particularly cruel officer, feared for his sadism, would often crush the ribcages of these helpless souls with his heavy, leather boots, standing atop the operating tables, extracting the very last drops of their infected blood. This blood was used for further experiments in the weaponizing of germs and poisons. In one gruesome experiment, plague-infected blood was fed to fleas, infecting these carriers of disease by the million. The fleas were then sealed in bomb casings, ready to be dispersed over the unsuspecting Chinese village of XuXul. A field test of unimaginable callousness and cruelty. On that fateful day, as Japanese bombers released the casings, XuXul danced through the crimson-tinted dust, an ethereal presence feeding on the impending suffering. Witnesses observed the fine reddish dust settling over XuXul, heralding a wave of agonizing flea bites that afflicted the entire village. None were spared, their bodies ravaged by the deadly pathogens they had unwittingly been exposed to. The consequences of Unit 731's atrocities should rightfully reverberate through history, a dark barbaric chapter that continues to haunt the collective memory of the Chinese people. None of the Japanese officers or men serving in Unit 731 was ever convicted of war crimes. Most went on to serve in civilian life, unfettered by blame or conscience. One of the heads of the unit contributed to the American biological warfare program after the war. XuXul waited to fill more cages. Children of Trinity. The most destructive weapon ever created had its origins in the laboratories of early 20th century physicists. Their groundbreaking work unlocked the secrets of the atom and revealed the terrifying power hidden within. Perched in the swirling mists of the spectral plane, XuXul observed this crucial episode in humanity's scientific awakening with intense curiosity. How ingenious these mortal ape-like creatures were, divining the hidden mechanisms of reality itself. Paris, France. 1897 to 1904. What strange new power was this? XuXul pondered as Marie Curie shared news with Pierre of an astounding energy emitted by uranium ore. The couple toiled secretly in their simple Paris laboratory, systematically processing tons of pitchblende. "This is like no phenomenon before," Marie exclaimed. "I believe there are rays shooting out, we must determine their origin. A new element perhaps? Or a fundamental force hitherto unknown?" Pierre speculated as they analyzed the substance further. "I shall write to Becquerel. Maybe this radiation holds the key." They named the mystery element, polonium. Enthralled by the revelation of this unseen energy, a new obsession was born within XuXul. It stalked Marie and Pierre's efforts, witnessing their headaches, lesions, inexplicable illnesses resulting from exposure. What magnificent mortality this force possessed! In 1939, Albert Einstein's letter warning of German nuclear research spurred the United States government into action. The result was the Manhattan Project, a crash program to build the world's first atomic bomb. At facilities across the country, the greatest scientific minds of a generation tackled an unprecedented challenge. Robert Oppenheimer directed designs for atomic devices at Los Alamos Laboratory. Enrico Fermi oversaw the first sustained nuclear chain reaction under the University of Chicago Stadium in 1942, proof such weapons could be built. In vast plants across Washington, Tennessee, and South Carolina, tens of thousands labored to enrich uranium and manufacture bomb components. The endeavor rivaled the pyramids or Great Wall, a monumental effort cloaked in secrecy. By July 1945, the first operational weapon, implosion-type plutonium device gadget, was ready. Oppenheimer chose the remote Alamogordo bombing range for the test, christening it Trinity. At 5:30 a.m. on July 16, the device was hoisted atop a 100-foot tower and detonated. Blinding light flooded the desert as a mammoth fireball erupted skyward, leaving swirling clouds glowing purple, red and green. Below, sand had been vaporized into silicate glass now dubbed trinitite. As a mushroom cloud climbed over 7 miles high above the New Mexico desert, it was clear a new and terrifying age had dawned. Though not on the scale expected, the explosion exceeded equivalent to 20,000 tons of TNT. The atomic age had truly begun. The shockwaves from Trinity would soon radiate across Japan, the first and thus far only nation to directly endure atomic attack. Since Nazi Germany's surrender in May, the recalcitrant Japanese Empire remained America's primary adversary in the Pacific. After months of firebombing failed to push Japan to surrender, attention shifted to the superweapon developed in secrecy across America. On August 6, 1945, the B-29 superfortress, Enola Gay, departed Tinian Island carrying Little Boy, a highly enriched uranium gun-type bomb. Under perfect skies, the device detonated 1,900 feet over downtown Hiroshima at 8:15 a.m., unleashing hellfire below. Temperatures exceeded 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit, incinerating instantly those below and igniting firestorms across the largely wooden city. Blast pressures crumbled concrete buildings miles from ground zero. By day's end, over 70,000 people were dead, the city in ruins, countless more suffering agonizing radioactive burns. Yet Japan's belligerent military rulers still refused calls to surrender. So before dawn on August 9, a second atomic mission commenced. Boxcar departed Tinian carrying the plutonium implosion, Fat Man, both named to contrast the other. Lingering storms forced the B-29 to switch targets en route from Kokura to its secondary objective Nagasaki. At 11:02 a.m., the bomb detonated about 1,650 feet over Nagasaki, destroying nearly half the city and killing over 39,000 people instantly. The nightmare repeated. Finally acquiescing, Japan announced surrender on August 15, sparing invasion plans that predicted over 250,000 American casualties and millions of Japanese dead. The atomic infernos over Hiroshima and Nagasaki demonstrated humanity's capacity for simultaneous creation and destruction. The unleashing of the fundamental forces of matter came at an appalling cost in lives taken, cities demolished, and generations irradiated by lingering fallout scattered by the turbulent winds of history. Yet the weapons also heralded atomic power, a fundamentally new energy source. Like the mythical Prometheus, stealing fire or forbidden knowledge that both empowers and imperils, atomic science forever changed the trajectory of civilization. XuXul, the spectral wraith, observed the Trinity bomb test with a mixture of shock and fascination. The sheer magnitude of the explosion surpassed its expectations, and the unleashed energy rippled through the fabric of the spectral realm. As the bombs descended over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, XuXul hovered in the spectral shadows, its ethereal form pulsating with an otherworldly resonance. The unleashed nuclear infernos below resonated with the very essence of XuXul, causing a surge in its spectral power. The devastation amplified its spectral influence, granting XuXul an unprecedented connection to the unfolding human tragedy. In the aftermath of the atomic blasts, XuXul found itself immersed in an energy surge, its spectral presence transcending new thresholds as the echoes of human suffering reverberated through the spectral domain. The unexpected outcome of the Trinity test had unwittingly catalyzed XuXul's ascent into an even more formidable and enigmatic force within the cosmic tapestry. Far above, silent and cloaked, concerned observers watched in their craft. The crew witnessed the Trinity test with a mix of anticipation and consternation. The atomic power unleashed below left them in a momentary state of uncertainty. In the quiet depths of their craft, they withheld action, opting to gauge the impact of humanity's newfound destructive capability before deciding their next move. The tension within the alien vessel mirrored the pivotal moment Earth had entered, suspended between the echoes of a detonation and the uncertain future that awaited. The Lithium Bomb. It was not just the American atomic weapons program that concerned the Silent Watchers, nor was it the two imperial Japanese programs that were a focus. It was the Nazi nuclear weapons program that was of real concern because of the technological horror that lay at its core. The Japanese Imperial Army program was based in a Tokyo suburb and had made considerable progress in developing uranium fluoride chemistry. They had perfected a much more efficient process for enriching uranium than the brute force method that the United States had employed. Fortunately, this program was halted by the Allied destruction of the research site in early 1945. The Imperial Japanese Navy's parallel program was far more advanced. Based in Northern Korea, a successful atomic test was carried out a few days after the Trinity explosion. The Northern Korea Peninsula is uranium-rich. The flights of the Enola Gay and Boxcar saw an end to these ambitions. The Nazi bomb program was far more dangerous and capable. There was a fake program run by Werner Heisenberg, but this was always simply a front to convince Allied intelligence that Nazi Germany was far behind. The true Nazi atomic program was run by Dr. Walter Gerlach and controlled by SS General Hans Kammler. Gerlach's team, based in the Harz Mountains and using facilities at the new giant Buna plant outside Auschwitz, had managed to enrich to 19.7%, over 680 kilograms of uranium oxide. This enrichment level allowed safe storage and handling, but was just one enrichment cycle away from full weapons-grade fissionable material. The Nazis could create between 6 to 8 medium-yield weapons, each with the destructive power of the American devices. Kammler and Gerlach had anticipated that these would have been insufficient to win the war, resulting in a stalemate, because they had correctly assumed the Allies had similar projects of their own. The gifted Nazi team had discovered in early 1941 that another far more potent weapon was possible. By using lithium deuteride, a thermonuclear weapon, with an explosive power multiplied 100-fold, could be constructed with the uranium device as a trigger. Heavy water was needed to generate sufficient lithium deuteride, and the Nazis were within months of completing at least 7 ultra-powerful devices. A squadron of modified long-range Heinkel 177 bombers were already stationed and ready in Stavanger, Norway, awaiting their deadly ordnance. Their targets were to be New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. Pilots would have to parachute into the Atlantic, to awaiting U-boats for rescue. Attacks were also planned for London and Moscow, for which the bombers could make a full round trip. A single massive first strike to win the war outright. The European war ended any hopes that the Nazi leadership had of realizing their heinous plan, but they did send 550 kilograms of their partially enriched uranium oxide to Japan on a U-boat, U-234, in early May 1945. This vessel carried plans and parts to boost the flagging Japanese war effort. It also carried parts for a Messerschmitt 262 jet fighter, several V-2 rocket engines and guidance systems, high-technology bomb fuses and critical metals. U-234 also carried 2 Imperial Japanese naval technical officers, Lieutenant Commander Hideo Tominaga and Lieutenant Commander Shoji Genzo, both of whom had spent 2 years studying details of German high technology. Nazi Germany surrendered while U-234 was in the Atlantic. Its commander, Captain Feller, signaled its surrender to the Royal Canadian Navy and agreed to make port at Halifax, Nova Scotia, but to everyone's surprise, the USS Sutton intercepted the vessel on May 14. The 2 Japanese officers committed suicide in preference to being interned. Surviving officers and men of U-234 reported that their captain, upon reaching a fishing port in Maine, was greeted on shore by a tall, thin man wearing a long coat and sporting a fedora. Oppenheimer privately referred to the Hiroshima device as the German bomb. The Nazis did finally manage to get their grotesque cargo to Japan, just not in the manner they had first anticipated. World War II could have ended very differently indeed. XuXul remained unaware of this thermonuclear harbinger of annihilation for now. The Watchers needed a plan.